What's up, people of YouTube? Hope you're all doing well. So we got another RCQ recap for you. Before I jump into this, I wanted to get the public opinion on these recap videos. So when I'm doing one of these, it's not for the purpose of saying like, oh my God, I'm winning a bunch, come look at me. It's more for me to have an opportunity to talk about some matchups that either we haven't seen a lot on stream or we haven't really broken down, and get an opportunity to go over like sideboarding and discuss gameplay of them. So I'm only doing these if they've got some interesting matchups for them or something that I think is a learning experience for people. So if that's what you're taking away from it, then I would love to hear that feedback. If not, if you think these are horrible and you want to stick to just gameplay, let me know, because as always, like, constructive criticism is how we grow the channel. But I'm going to go through the rounds I played in the RCQ, the results of all the rounds, talk about like some sideboarding and gameplay for all these different matchups. And then at the end is a little bit of a bonus. I'm going to throw in some cards that I'm looking forward to testing when Final Fantasy drops in like a couple days. So if you're wanting to stick around for that part, feel free to watch the rest of it. If not, everything will be timestamped below so you can jump ahead to wherever you want to go. All right, let's get into it. As always, got my notepad ready to go with a few matchup notes to keep track of. So round one, I was up against, well, first of all, this is the list that I decided to run. I say decided to run. I was planning on testing some more stuff out, but I got stuck in some bad traffic because of a wreck on the way to the RCQ. So when I got there, it was like 3 minutes to sign up, start filling out my deck list, and go from there. So I didn't have time to test anything crazy. It's basically the indie list. All I changed around was an enduring curiosity in the sideboard, because I've been trying it out online a little bit, in place of something not too impactful. But either way, let's go ahead and jump into the matches. The first match was against Blue White Control, guy that I know a little bit better now. I traveled with a couple of times. Also has a Twitch channel if you want to go follow. What is it? It's like Big Brain MTG. Name's Riley. Really good Blue White Control player across all formats. But played against Blue White Control round one. Game one was kind of how you expect Blue White Control to go. With a mid-rangey, tempo-y deck like Dimir, you run the risk of drawing the wrong half of your deck. And I just ended up drawing like multiple fatal pushes, dismember. I might have had to shoot the sheriff, but either way, they got it to fairy down under any sort of interaction. And I was not able to follow up with enough pressure to get to fairy off the board and avoid sweepers. So game one kind of out the window. And as always, I try to make sure people recognize that game one honestly doesn't matter that much. Like, if you can steal a game one win, that's great. But a lot of the times you're just going to have that wrong half scenario. You're hoping the pieces line up the right way. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But either way, sideboarding against Blue White Control. What I did was take all of my Haymaker cards out of the sideboard, or bring in my Haymaker cards like Kaito, Jace, Enduring Curiosity, bring in the extra Thoughtseize, and then Harbinger of the Seas. We had tested a little bit the week before, because I stayed with this person at Indy and we played the Blue White Control Dimir matchup a little bit. And I was having a lot of success with Harbinger of the Seas, cutting off double white for stuff like Supreme Verdict, Wrath the Skies, making it awkward on their mana because they'd have to fetch basic planes early, which could throw Counterspell or Narset out of whack. So even if I didn't see Harbinger, the threat of Harbinger was still pretty effective. The board outs, I took out all the fatal pushes because I think they had Snapcaster, but that was the only legal target. took out Dismember, left in Shoot the Sheriff because it can kill like a Solitude. It can kill Solitude, Hall of Storm Giants, and Snapcaster, where all of my other removal spells are missing something in that equation. And then the last board out, I believe, was an Oculus. It was either an Oculus or a Murktide, just to go along with the idea of if they did get it to Fairy down and bounce one of my creatures that involved me exiling my yard, then I probably wouldn't be able to recast a second one. And between like Solitude, Supreme Verdict to Fairy, reasonable chance they'd be able to get rid of the first threat. So I just don't want to be flooded on things that are exiling my yard to resolve. So I believe I had cut an Oculus because they were on Wrath of the Skies. So cutting the one with the lower CMC gave me the ability to play around a few extra removal spells with Murktide. Not dying to like Prismatic Ending, Wrath of the Skies. So sideboarding kind of like that. Game 2 and 3 were almost identical, where I just didn't have to overcommit to the board. I was able to get down like an early Psychic Frog. They used a removal spell, discard an Oculus in response, go to my turn, unearth the Oculus, and hold up counter magic. Or it might have been one of those games. I got down a Harbinger, was able to lock them on 1 white mana and force a negation the next play to get rid of the Harbinger, like a Teferi, something like that. Get another threat down when I was kind of protected with Wrath. I do know my opponent did not see many Solitudes game 2 or 3, so that certainly helped out. But the ability to not overcommit by getting an Oculus onto the battlefield and kind of letting it do its job of going wide around 1-for-1 removal made a really big deal in that matchup. So started off 1-0 over blue-white control on to round 2. So I might have gotten rounds 2 and 4 mixed up on the board. I cannot 100% remember. All I know is it doesn't matter which one is which. And you'll, I guess, figure out why. So round 2 was against Grixis Control, the new like Snapcaster Flame of Anor style deck. Game 1, we had a really good trade of resources early. They had Tamiyo. I had to kill Tamiyo. I had Frog. They countered Frog. They followed up with Frog. I countered their Frog. Just back and forth, 1-for-1s. Eventually, I thought they were going to be able to run away with it because they got to stick a Tamiyo, kind of went unanswered for a few turns. But I found a Murktide Regent. And Murktide, in the Grixis matchup, if you're able to dodge like Flame of Anor plus Bolt, really, really difficult to get off the board. Some number of their lists are running like Shieldred's Edict, maybe a Shoot the Sheriff, but the number of options they have to get Murktide off the battlefield is very, very limited. So sideboarding, I brought in the 2 Stern Scoldings, the Nihil Spellbomb, Jace, Curiosity, Kaito. I believe I left the 3rd Thoughtseize in the board. They are a Snap Bolt deck, like Bolt, Snap, Bolt. So going too aggressive on your life total early can be detrimental. And then the Harbingers I bring in because they don't have a basic mountain. So Harbinger can shut off Lightning Bolt, Flame of Anor, Snap Bolt, Snap Flame, as long as you are careful in playing out your Harbinger at a time where they can't just like end a turn kill. The board outs, the Force Negations definitely coming out. I don't want to get 2-for-1. I trimmed a couple cantrips. I think I trimmed like 2 Thought Scours and Unearth Oculus, which is usually Thought Scour, Unearth, Oculus, one of each is typically my shave in most matchups where I think they're going to bring in some amount of Grave Hate, but maybe not overkill. So expecting like Nihil Spell Bomb, something like that. Maybe Surgical Extraction. I'm a little less all in on the Oculus plan. And then board out a Thought Scour because of Bowmasters. Just not wanting to overcommit into cantrips. And I think that was my last cut, was another copy of Consider or Stubborn Denial. I can't remember, but about the same percentage wise. Neither one's going to swing you a big amount, but just wanting to make it so that I don't have as many dead cards in hand, like Stub, if they get my threat off the board, or as many cantrips that I'm like Xeroxing through if they've got a Bowmaster. So we'll just throw Stub over here at the moment. But sideboarding something like that. Game 2, they were able to stick down a Tameo on 1 and kind of tempo out with that. Really just went unanswered, drew them several extra cards until I was finally able to find an answer for it. But at that point, they had enough pressure to get across the finish line. Game 3 was a really good back and forth. Cling to Dust for them did a lot of work this game. I think they drew like 4 cards off a single Cling to Dust, which was absolutely nuts. Thankfully, I did have a Murktide I was able to get down on a turn. They tapped down to 1 blue. I assumed that they had a Stern Scolding, so I wasn't going to go for a Frog. But if they had Mystical Dispute to kill her to counter my Murktide, I would have been blown out of the water completely. Thankfully, they didn't. Landed a Murktide. By the time this game ended, that Murktide, I think, was like a 13-13 or something. Between Murktide coming down, Frog jumping, them Cling to Dusting. This really big Murktide. But the game actually got finished. I was at 4 life. Or I think I was at 6. And I went for like a cantrip on my turn. They Bowmastered, pinged me twice, put me down to 4. I got a Kaito against a Bowmaster, a 2/2 army token, and a Psychic Frog. I've got this big Murktide on board, a Kaito in hand. And I play out the Kaito, stun the Frog, and then tank for, I don't know, a good 5 minutes. Because if I swing in with the Murktide, I've got them on a 2-turn clock. If I do, they've got Bowmaster token swinging back at me. I'm dead to a Bolt off the top, a Snapcaster off the top, a K-Command off the top. Because they have a Bolt in the yard. And or like a removal spell on my Murktide basically kills me. So I make the swing in, pass the turn, and I think it was like opponent into turn, Cling to Dusts me, draws a card, untap, discards to the Frog to get an extra card in the yard, to Cling to Dust again, to draw a card. They got 3 mana open, drew the Snapcaster, but didn't have anything except the Cling to Dust into yard to Snapcaster back because they had to exile everything else. So ended up winning effectively at 1 life with a big Murktide Regent. But definitely goes to show Murktide's power in matchups like that, especially against anything with red-based removal. Just a lot of times they're not going to be able to get it off the board. I'm pretty sure the Murktide game 1 got there with like a fatal push in opponent's hand. So Oculus would not have done the same job. Round 3 was against another player that I went to Indy with on Orzhov mid-range, the Aether Vial Blink Orzhov version. I knew what they were playing ahead of time. I know it's like a sub 20% matchup for Oculus. So really just trying to make life as difficult as I can by putting up a little bit of a fight. Game 1, I remember there was an Aether Vial on one that I forced. And then double Bale Merc, double Solitude, double Emperor of Bones. I'm pretty sure was the rollout over the next few turns. So even though I got like a turn 2 frog down after my force, it got Bale Merc into Solituded. I followed up with another threat like an Oculus Unearth that I discarded in response to the Solitude, and it immediately got Solituded again before I even got to pass turn. So just one of those games where Bale Merc looping Solitude was like in the opening hand, got things rolling, could not come back from that. Game 2, against the Vial versions, I'll usually bring in all 4 consigns, just more ETB triggers. You can also hit Vial itself, especially on the play. Brought in Curiosity, Jace, Kaito, Thoughtseize, Stern Scoldings, Deluge. And I think I even brought in the Harbingers just for a chance to like cheese out a game. Boarding out Force Negations, board out Stubborn Denial, cut a couple copies of Counterspell, I think. Pretty positive. Like on the play, you've got Consign, Thoughtseize, and a couple Counterspells to deal with Bale Merc onto. So I don't want to be as reliant on Counterspell against Aether Vials. Then bringing out Unearth, and Oculus, Thought Scour. Like, I had to go kind of deep in the tank on sideboarding because I had so much stuff I just couldn't afford really to get 1 for 1 or 2 for 1 if they had like Ephemerate or something. I knew they had Bowmaster, so I wanted to trim down on some cantrips. I want to say my boarding ended up being something like this. Just board in like all the 2 for 1s, anything that could try to punch a hole and cheese out the game. Game 2, I actually won off the back of consigning a Vial on 1 into, I believe, surveilling over an Oculus off an Undercity Sewers and unearthing it. But I know there was an Oculus that ran away with the game. Or would have run away with the game, except it got answered, and I had to follow up with double Graveyard Trespasser. That was game 2. So Oculus got dealt with, and I just started hard casting Graveyard Trespassers, and they didn't have the resources to get rid of both of them. Game 3 was where I had an Oculus that I thought was going to run away with the game until they started Bale Merc and Flicker Wisp looping, and I could not get out of that lock. So unfortunately, it is a very, very, very rough matchup. I wish I could give a bunch of good advice on the Orzhov matchup. I do have a matchup guide in the YouTube. I don't think it's in the description of this video, but I have a matchup guide of Dimir versus Orzhov, and it's got a lot of good tips on how to potentially steal some games. But you kind of just have to accept that this is a pretty awful matchup. We don't have a lot of great resources to fight them. They make a lot of our counter magic dead. 2 for 1s, Bale Merc coming down under counterspell if they're on the play. It can just be really, really awkward. There's going to be a lot of games where there's nothing particularly effective you can do. And yeah, I really wish I had a better answer for y'all, but that's just the matchup you don't want to see. Either way, on to round number 4. So at this point, I'm 2-1. It's 5 rounds before cut to top 8. So if I can pick up a win in round 4, I can ID round 5 and make it to top 8. Round 4, I'm up against Mardu Energy, which obviously we've played Boros a million times. I was not expecting Mardu, but typically Mardu's just for Thoughtseize, Bowmaster, maybe some stuff out of the sideboard, but those being like the two primary cards you're interested in dealing with. Game 1, I remember I kept a hand on the play with Thoughtseize, Spell Snare, Oculus, a Murktide, another cantrip like a Thought Scour, and a couple lands. And you turn 1, play a land, go. They play an Ocelot. I Surveil, put a Fatal Push on top, draw the push, land, go. They play the Ocelot. I Fatal Push. They play a 2-drop. I Spell Snare, go to my turn, Thoughtseize. And they've got like a Johnny Thraben Charm, double Galvanic Discharge. And I set up a sequence of take a discharge, hope that they main phase the Ajani instead of going for the Thraben Charm, which they do. I've got another counter for that. Untap, play out like an 8/8 Murktide, and that just runs away with the game because they've got like a Thraben Charm in hand that doesn't kill it, a discharge in hand that's not killing it. And I found out after the game that I think they had cut all of their static prisons, so they effectively had no way of getting the Murktide off the battlefield at that point. So Murktide definitely ran away with it. Sideboarding, I brought in some of this stuff around. Brought in Spell Bomb, Engineered Explosives, Toxic Deluge, the 2 Stern Scoldings, and the 2 Harbinger. I don't normally bring in Harbinger against Boros Energy, but against Mardu with a little bit of a greedier mana base, decided to bring in the Harbingers and give that a shot. Sideboarding out, I took out an Oculus, an Unearth, a Thought Scour. Thought Scour a little more because of Bowmasters. I think I took out a Consider too, but just not wanting to overcommit to the cantrips. Take out the Thought Seizes, and the last cut was a Force Negation. Orzhov or Mardu being a little more creature heavy with the Bowmasters. The Force is a little less impactful, especially once I didn't see Static Prison. I didn't know that they had cut them entirely at this point, but I still think it's a card that I don't want to be too all in on. And game 2 basically came down to opponent had a turn 1 Ragavan. I did not have an answer for Ragavan in hand. Drew for turn, Fatal Push off the top. So Fatal Push Ragavan during their turn. I think they played like tap land Guide of Souls there. I went to my turn, played second land pass. They played something into a counter spell. I untapped on turn 3, played a Harbinger, and that was kind of the end of the game. They were completely locked out off the Harbinger. They had gotten like Sacred Foundry on 1 for Ragavan, tapped Godless Shrine on 2, and then turn 3, I think, played like Elegant Parlor. So they just had no mana available for Harbinger. Couldn't attack in with their threat, and I was able to land either a Murktide or a Thought Scour into Oculus the next turn, and that just kind of sealed the deal. Just swing in over the air, get the game over with as quickly as possible. So Harbinger, great. Even if you are seeing a bunch of rulings on Urza's Saga, don't leave home without your Harbingers. Match number 5. Since I was 3-1 at this point, we could ID into top 8. It was me and Mono Blue Belcher. So pretty glad to not have to play that matchup after it absolutely destroyed me in Indianapolis. But we drew round 5, went to top 8. Funny situation at the start of top 8. So there was 3 of us out of 8 that didn't really care that much about the invite. Myself being one of them. If I got it, cool, I'll go to Vegas. but if I don't get it, no loss of sleep. I got paired against one of the other players that didn't care about the invite in the first round of top 8. So we were essentially trying to convince each other that we needed to redistribute prizes for them to get the invite. So they were like, oh, well, if you want to redistribute and put 70 more in my side, then you can take the invite. And I was like, well, I don't want the invite. I want the payout. So we ended up having to play our match to see who was going to go to the next round to try to redistribute there. Really funny situation. But I was on the play the first round of top 8. I think I was like second or third seed. It was a bunch of draws, weird cut to top 8. But I was on the play against Burn. Knew it was against Burn ahead of time, and the game plan against Burn is basically mulligan to Psychic Frog. Obviously, it's a little more nuanced than that, but for the most part, if you can get a Frog down on turn 2, you can clog up the ground very easily. They're probably not going to be able to get Psychic Frog off the battlefield without wasting a lot of damage on it. And if you just grow it out of range, you can end the game in like 3 or 4 swings, plus potentially find a counter spell or 2 along the way to seal the deal. So I mulliganed to 6, and I had like 2 lands, Psychic Frog, Force of Negation, another blue card, and something else. I was like, all right, snap keep. Easiest keep in my life. Land go, opponent plays land Seal of Fire. So if you don't know, Seal of Fire should be immediate, like Chandra's Incinerator. That should be the thought if you see a Seal of Fire. So I play out my turn 2 Frog, pass. Opponent goes second land, Seal of Fire you. Cool. What's the 3 mana, 2 less with Spectacle? That burn spell at my face. So I'm like, okay, Incinerator. Force a negation that, and they just go pass. I'm like, all right, cool. Untap, draw a counter spell, ditch like 2 cards into Frog, attack in, draw something else, pass the turn back. Opponent goes main phase burn spell, second burn spell, counter spell that, pass back. Hit them with Frog again, play out like a Murktide and say go, and opponent can't kill me from there. So yeah, like recognizing that Chandra's Incinerator is a possibility and stopping that from coming down as soon as possible is a really big deal. And then Frog's a really big deal. Like if you can Frog Unearth Oculus, great, but just getting Frog by itself is usually okay enough. Sideboarding against Burn. I brought in Stern Scoldings and Harbingers, which was a mistake, and I'll talk about that momentarily. But brought in Stern Scoldings, Harbingers, brought out the Thought Seizes, Dismember, and the last cut was, I think, just like a Thought Scour or Consider. I don't remember off the top of my head, but I don't think it matters all that much. Or it might have been an Unearth, just thinking of like Rest in Peace, or an Oculus. Either way, not the important part of the sideboarding. The important part is that when I had my opening hand, I kept a 7 with like a Frog, 2 lands, a Harbinger of the Seas, and a counter spell, some sort of counter spell, and then I think an Unearth. And opponent went land, Goblin Guide, attack, flipped over a Verdant Catacomb, so I got like a free land that I had to discard to hand. Or no, I didn't discard to hand size because I ended up killing the Goblin Guide on one. But either way, played out my land, kill the Goblin Guide, pass. Or, yeah, kill the Goblin Guide so I don't have to discard to hand size, pass. opponent plays land, burn spell, like Swift Spear, burn spell. I play out frog on my turn, pass back. They go burn spell. You attack him with Swift Spear, discard some stuff to the Swift Spear or to the frog to block. Either way, the reason the sideboarding was a mistake is turns out they were on mono red. And I thought maybe they were on Boros, but I didn't have enough information game one to make that call for sure. I just saw Mountain, Seal of Fire, second Mountain, or fetch for a Mountain, burn spell, and then like turn 3, another fetch for a Mountain. I didn't know that they were on mono red. I assumed they weren't. I should have waited till I had more information and just boarded in the 2 Stern Scoldings for the 2 Thoughtseizes, but decided to try to cut off with the Harbinger, and it ended up just being a completely dead card. Thankfully, it didn't matter because Psychic Frog is a pretty phenomenal card as well, and we were able to get away with a 2-0 win over Burn. And then round 7, the second round of top 8, my opponent, I guess the best way that I can sum up the scenario, it was my same Mardu energy opponent from the Swiss. Best way of summing it up is my opponent's suggestion of a prize redistribution outweighed the value that I placed on the invite. Therefore, I was willing to concede to my opponent based off of their suggested redistribution. So, yeah, opponent wanted the invite a lot. I didn't want the invite that much, so ended up scooping to them in top 4. But regardless, fun event for the day. I think there were some interesting matchups like blue-white control, the new Grixis control we haven't played against a ton, so really great to get games in against that. Mardu energy that I hadn't seen a lot of recently, burn. So cool matchups, a lot of different kind of gameplay showcased in this event. As always, if you got like sideboarding questions for any of those matchups or how things typically play out, love to know so I can answer those, or you can join the Discord with the link down below. Come talk about it, come get some opinions, come get some feedback, and drum up the discussion there. But anyway, let's get into some of the new Final Fantasy cards I'm going to be trying out, and hopefully that might inspire you to do the same. So I mentioned here at the end I would go over just a couple test cards I'm thinking of trying out when the new set drops. The first one being Cecil Dark Knight. This Rakdos deck was originally a kind of brew we tried around on stream once that originally had Death Shadow. The idea being that you're using a lot of these life loss effects, Thoughtseize, Street Wraith, along with the boosted artifact mana and Urza Saga to kind of knock your life total down low enough so that stuff like the Last Ride or Death Shadow could potentially one-shot with Temur Battle Rage. It has since kind of evolved into a Quarry Steel Cutter deck, using the artifact mana to trigger Quarry Steel, get a little bit of a wider board presence, and now with the updated rules with Blood Moon and Urza Saga, we could potentially become a main deck Blood Moon deck. But Cecil giving another cheap legendary creature to allow your Mox Ambers to tap for mana with a lot of these black sources. Cruise Last Ride immediately without needing any counters or anything like that. And plays really well if you're able to lock your opponent out with a Blood Moon by flipping into just a 4/4 after combat and closing out the game very quickly. It's a card that I want to try out in the archetype, as well as potentially Garland, Knight of Cornelia. So this black-red legendary 3/2, whenever you cast a non-creature spell, Surveil 1. As you can tell, we do have a lot of very cheap non-creature spells with our Moxes, Mishra's Bauble, Last Ride, Unholy Heat, Quarry Steel Cutter that can all trigger Garland to Surveil. Has the added benefit of maybe flipping late game, but probably unrealistic. This is a build I'm looking at. The second one is Dimir Oculus with Matoya, which Matoya is this 3-mana legendary creature. It's a 1/4. Whenever you scry or surveil, draw a card. So the idea here is Oculus already wants to play surveil lands to get Oculus into the graveyard potentially. Consider surveils, but the twist on this build is going up an extra copy of Undercity and playing Otherworldly Gaze instead of Thought Scour. There was a rules change back in 2022. Otherworldly Gaze was originally printed, which I've got a copy here, to say, look at the top 3 cards of your library. I'll read that. Look at the top 3 cards of your library, put any number of them into your graveyard and the rest back on top of your library in any order. Well, it originally didn't say surveil, but in 2022, there was a rules change where they took some cards like Otherworldly Gaze and replaced their Oracle text with the keyword surveil. So Otherworldly Gaze now says, like you see on screen, surveil 3, draw a card. Well, surveil triggers Matoya. So being able to Otherworldly Gaze to help turbo out Oculus or turbo out a Murktide, flash it back later, draw a card off Matoya, or just cast it the first time, surveil 3, draw a card for 1 mana. Pretty big deal when you think about cards like Preordain, Scry 2, draw a card, just getting unbanned. So we could have potentially 1 mana surveil 3, draw a card with flashback. So I want to try that out, see if it's got any sort of merit or if it's just kind of wishful thinking. The other card that I thought about in this shell is Emmett Selch. So 1 blue and a black for a 2/4 vigilance. When it enters or attacks, draw a card, then discard a card. At the beginning of your upkeep, if there are 14 or more cards in your graveyard, you may transform Emmett Selch and it becomes a 6/6 with vigilance that lets you cast cards from your graveyard or play cards from your graveyard. So you can play lands, play spells from your yard. And then if a card would go to your graveyard, it gets exiled instead. The downside on Emmett Selch is 14 cards in your yard is a lot of cards to need in your graveyard to be able to flip it. But in gold fishing with this list with Otherworldly Gaze, I have found that getting 14 cards in your yard is not that bad. You have a lot of turns where you're just like, turn 1, Otherworldly Gaze, maybe put an Oculus in the yard, got an Unearth in hand. Turn 2, Unearth an Oculus, and all of a sudden you're up to like 5 cards in your yard already. And then 6 when you trigger Oculus on your opponent's turn. 7 when you fetch again. Maybe you flash back Otherworldly Gaze, and you're up to like 8, 9, maybe 10 on like turn 3. There's the chance that you could have this online in turn 4 without needing major deck overhauls, like discarding to Frog, surveilling to draw to get more cards, potentially discard to Frog, putting cards in the yard with Otherworldly Gaze, putting cards in the yard with Oculus. It does add up. I don't think at the moment that the payoff is worth it or worth all the effort, but I wanted to at least bring that card to the attention because if it is one that you're really wanting to check out or really wanting to dive into, Otherworldly Gaze has made it a lot easier to get that count online. But either way, that's a couple of cards I want to be trying out as soon as the set drops. So be looking forward to the stream with those. As always, hope you enjoy the video. If you find this kind of content really useful, if it's helping you learn and helping you prepare for your next event, then I would enjoy continuing to do these recap videos. But if it's not your thing, not enjoying it, not feeling it, let me know and we'll adjust accordingly. Other than that, hope y'all have a fantastic rest of your day. Stay safe, enjoy some good food and company. I'll catch y'all back live later. Adios for now.